So, here's the first of my attempts to live up to what I said I'd do last month and cover smaller games. I'm still working on a video game schlock series that will try to look lovingly at some of the cheesiest Z-grade stuff the internet has to offer, but I figure Blips will be the show where I champion stuff, not as a buying guide or a formal review that scores the bad along with the good and determines if it's worth your money, but just an attempt to raise the profile of stuff I think has been maybe a little overlooked, so that if it sounds up your alley, you could go check it out. And again, keep in mind, I won't be focusing on the bad. I'm going to tell you why you should buy these games, but they're largely going to be smaller, less polished, buggy, short, or with more jank than you might be used to, so just know what you're getting into. These also won't be mini Errant Signal episodes. I'm not going to be doing thematic analysis here because that tends to require spoiling games, and the whole point is that the games here have been largely overlooked. So really just think of these episodes as a long list of, hey, here's a cool thing that exists. And to be clear, I don't receive compensation from any of the games listed. For this show to work, it can't be an advertising service. It needs to be me curating a list of stuff I think is kind of cool or interesting. I also didn't get any of these games on this list for free, but if I ever do get gifted a game that I want to put on a Blips list, I'll mention that up front. I'm just laying down the rules because I'm still sort of uncomfortable with something that may inform purchasing decisions instead of just being a thematic analysis. Anyways, on to the first game. Overwhelm is cool for two reasons. First, because it's a Metroidvania game that can be beaten in like an hour or two if you're good and you don't die, but that's really difficult. For the record, I've put in about 2.5 hours and I still haven't quite beaten it, but I have a penchant for games that are, at least conceivably, really short, and Overwhelm fits that description to a T. But the main reason Overwhelm is so cool is its core gameplay conceit. It is a reverse Metroidvania. That is to say, in other Metroidvania games, you go and kill the bosses who drop a new ability that gives you access to new areas so that you could kill more bosses, rinse and repeat. In this game, killing bosses doesn't make you stronger, it makes the enemies stronger. Each time you kill a boss, you'll be releasing new types of enemies throughout the entire game world that makes your exploration that much tougher. It presents a game that almost has a degree of Mega Man logic here. What order should you kill the bosses in order to ensure that the worst mutations are saved for last? Is it better to deal with speedy bees for the majority of the game, or shielded bulls that can only be shot from behind? And you have to choose wisely because there's a roguelike element to the game. If you die 3 times, either before picking up a boss crystal or returning it to the center of the map, the game world resets. So you have 3 lives to get to and then defeat a boss, and then 3 more lives to get the gem it drops back to the hub. Do that for all of the bosses and you win the game, but if at any point you do lose 3 times, then it's game over and the whole world resets. That's not quite as obnoxious as it sounds. You can restart the game at any of the boss doors for bosses you've beaten to cut down on that initial travel time. But it does make a game designed around scaling up the difficulty as you play a really tense experience, and like I said, it's pretty tough. I still haven't beaten it. The game also plays with ammo scarcity. Early in the game, every enemy goes down in one shot, and your ammo is easily topped off by the crates outside of a boss fight. But as more enemies unlock that take more bullets to defeat, ammo becomes increasingly precious. The game slowly pushes you towards using the melee attack, which costs no ammo but is incredibly risky because it requires getting close to insta-kill monsters that can turn on a dime. Overwhelm is, as the name implies, a pretty intense experience. If I had any real complaints, it'd be that the camera always seemed to be working against me, which is a pretty big sin in the world of instant death leaping monster games. Oh, and the weird teleporting thing the bosses do, it's done to build tension and move some of these giant bosses off screen and give you the sense that they could be coming in from anywhere in the middle of a fight, and kind of contributes to the game's light-ish horror tones. But really it just feels like the game kind of glitched out, and I'm not a huge fan of that mechanic. But still, if Massacre Boss Rush Reverse Metroidvanias with a monochrome palette sounds like a neat thing to you, maybe check it out. It's still weird to me that 24 years later we still don't have a video game version of that game that was played in the movie Hackers. And yeah, I know, first I'm dating myself, and second of all, it was a prototype of footage for what would eventually become Wipeout, but Wipeout also isn't the game that's teased in the movie Hackers. It's a leaderboard-driven game where you're piloting a hovering futurecraft through an obstacle-laden tunnel using 2 analog sticks, and crash so quickly that games only last a few minutes at most. That's cool, but it's not Wipeout. Thankfully, Drift Force is now here to satiate the needs of people who, like me, want to live out their own obscure 90s cyberpunk movie fantasies. Or if you want to be cynical, Drift Force is an infinite runner with a few seeded levels and high scoreboards for all of them, but I feel like that shortchanges the game a bit. The star of the show is the game's controls. The left analog stick turns the ship, while the right analog stick allows it to strafe laterally across the track. That doesn't sound like a lot, but with dual analog inputs, it's a surprisingly nuanced setup. Combining the two, you can get some really tight turns or graceful recoveries from oversteering, and the vehicle feels incredibly responsive, which is good because the game's got a devilish sense of speed. The end result is one of those easy-to-learn, difficult-to-master games, where learning how to drive the ship and avoid basic obstacles is simple, but learning how to put the ship exactly where you want it on the track at the angle you need it to be at for the next section is much harder. There's lots of dexterity and muscle memory at play, and if you're the kind that likes crawling up leaderboards as a sign of your own improvement, it can be kind of addictive. Along the way, you'll pick up glowing orbs, which becomes one of the game's more interesting risk-reward systems. See, the orbs give you points, but they don't reward those points until you've collected 5 orbs, and the speed with which you collect those 5 orbs is part of the bonus they confer. So there's this sort of planning known routes where you can either go faster than is safe to in order to maximize your score, or try to only collect orbs when you know you can get a whole set of 5 real quick rather than just grabbing the first orb you see and starting that chain of 5 way too early. And figuring out those routes is helped by having those pre-seeded levels that allow you to revisit them over and over. There is also a level that's generated by a random seed, but high scores on that feel a little bit more about distance and luck than route planning. Ultimately, there's a dearth of environments. There's normal, ice, fire, and desert, and while there's 6 seeded levels to give you 6 different leaderboards to compete on, they don't really substantially vary between them other than just changing up the seed. But they also throw in a goofy pillar avoidance game, a space track, and a narrow borderless track, each with their own leaderboards. And hey, you can technically customize your spaceship. It's not exactly a feature-rich, futuristic racing experience, but it's $5 and it let me feel for a little bit like I was Zero Cool or Acid Burn, so hey, I count that as a win in my book. And as of this recording, I'm number 10 on the Track 5 leaderboards, so come at me? Tamashii is a Brazilian horror puzzle platformer inspired by a lot of Japanese indie titles of a similar vein. But to me it also kind of feels like you took the sketchbook of the death metal kid in your middle school math class and turned it into a video game. It's all dark shadows and gothic monsters and witches and gods with a satanic undertone, which oscillates between being kind of cool but also a little try-hardy.
Here lies the crown. Here lies the crown of Lucifer.
Like, there's some really good creepy body horror stuff here that largely works and is just great. And then there's one or two contrived, cheesy jump scare sections, which I kind of enjoy, but I know will turn off a lot of people. And then there's a lot of the desiccated Christian iconography without much meaning behind it, and ominous but empty dialogue like this. So its tone is a little weird and juvenile, but also that's some of the charm, I think. It's funhouse spooky, not actually scary, and transgressive, but mostly in that harmless way a teenager drawing skulls and pentagrams is. It's fun. Structurally, it's not all that dissimilar from something like Braid, even if it looks about as far removed from that game as it can get. There's an overworld where you explore to find different doorways, and then when you enter the doorways, you find yourself in a world that tests your understanding of a single mechanic or idea. See, you're the son of a pyramid-headed god, and you need to stop the witches blocking his ascendance. To do this, you need to defeat a series of cool-looking monsters who all wait at the end of each of these worlds. To get to them, you need to solve platforming puzzles that often involve dropping clones of yourself to trigger buttons at the right time or open the right doorways. It's all pretty standard puzzle platformer stuff outside of the horror aesthetic, but the puzzles are enjoyably well done. A little on the easy side, but satisfying. What really sells me on Tamashii, despite its hit-and-miss tone, is the pacing and level design. It's a tight hour-and-a-half experience, give or take, and there's really no fat here. Every level knows what mechanic it's messing with and how it contributes to your understanding of both how to use that mechanic and to the greater story, and the end result is something that's just perfectly consumable on even a few free hours. It's a great game to just binge your way through in one sitting, and I kind of love it when games let you do that. And it actually ends. There's a solid conclusion here. I wouldn't say it's a smart ending. It's sort of every indie horror game you've ever played meets every horror movie you've ever watched. Still, it's $5 to play a Brazilian satanic body horror puzzle platformer in the vein of Braid that tells a full story in an hour and a half, and that's pretty cool. These are supposed to be general recommendations, not deep critical analyses, so I'll try to keep the thematic stuff to a minimum. Still, it's hard to escape the premise here. Art School is a game where you are a new student on a digital art school campus. You are assigned projects to complete, and, to the best of your artistic ability, you complete them and turn them in for a grade. But it turns out those grades are, as near as I can tell, randomly generated. You can pour your heart and soul into a painting and get an F, or you can scribble a few lines into the easel and get an A. It's all up to the instructor, who turns out to be a computer, which is probably actually a random number generator. And with that, you can probably see where a lot of the commentary this game has is going. Each time you're handed an assignment, you're released to campus in order to find a quiet place to draw, some inspiration, or maybe a new painting tool or color to use. Consequently, progress through the game feels a bit like progressing as an artist. Where the opening of the game has you crudely sketching stick figures with a single color and a single pen, you'll soon find how to use multiple colors for shading, 3D paint to give your painting some depth, a fill tool to assist in coloring, and a myriad of other little digital toys. All of which keep the game's weird purple, blue, and pink color scheme going, and all of which tend to open up new painting possibilities while keeping control mostly out of your hands. Really, it kind of feels like those old KidPix paint applications. You're never able to draw exactly what you have in mind, but that's the point. The game doesn't want to encourage perfectionism. If it did, it wouldn't have the random number generator scores. It wants to encourage experimentation and expression. Art School wants you, the prompt, and the tools that gives you to work together to create something none of you can predict. The results are weird, funny, sometimes ugly, but always kind of surprising. And hey, the game saves all of the images to your hard drive so you can post them straight to social media and show off what you've made. Like I said, there's lots to read into here, about how we grow as artists through practice and self-discovery more than through the advice and critique of others, about how the world informs how we create more than any formal rules do, or about how restrictions and the loss of control can, in their own way, be freeing. But honestly, Cameron Kunzelman already did a great write-up of the game's themes over on Waypoint/Vice Games, and Blips isn't really the venue I want to have for that kind of material, so I'll just point you over there while saying that if you like KidPix or doodling just to see what you can come up with, it's worth a look. It's a game that's very much about encouraging non-artists to try to express themselves visually, and that's really cool. It's definitely more of a chill, relaxing, creative game than a systems-driven or narrative-driven title, and that's probably going to drive some people away, but for those who dig the absurdist comedy it's going for, and don't mind putting in the work to create a painting that a random number generator is going to assign a grade to, it's pretty adorable. So that's 4 games that you may not have heard of. Let me know if this format seems to be working. Do I need to go more in depth with the titles? How often would you want to see these? As often as I have enough games for them, which could be pretty frequently? Once a month? Once every few months? Never again? Let me know, I'm still trying to figure all this out. Anyways, I'll be back with another more traditional video essay real soon.